partners to keep moving ahead with you. And just a final note, and it's a point I made in 2 of the interviews, is that we should guard against trying to cut and paste Western experience into this context. I think we have to recognize that there's a unique social history in Ukraine, particularly in the Soviet period, that colors both conscious and subconscious perceptions of role and willingness to step forward, ideas about the work world, ideas about what women should be focused on. And I think that anyone who intervenes in this space has to spend some time not just taking Gender Studies 101 and doing the PowerPoint, but to look at the unique path that Ukrainian women have put behind them over the last century. So I think bringing the best of our ideas, but also being very sensitive to the unique experience of Ukrainian women, and conversely, Ukrainian men as well, because there is a degree of, I'm not sure if I should dare use the word infantilism, but when people tell you, well, our women are very strong, they do everything, without them we would be lost, the implication is, well, we don't need to worry about a whole lot of things. We can get together with our buddies and have a good time, and they'll pick up the pieces, they'll take care of things, they'll make sure things don't fall apart. So really it has to be a societal effort to both incorporate the past, think it through, draw conclusions, and move forward.
I'm delighted to, first of all, thank you, Ambassador, for very penetrating and thought-provoking remarks, and invite Joanne Wagner, who's the Assistance Coordinator from the US Embassy. Can I invite everyone to put their phones on silent before we continue? The Assistance Coordinator to the US Embassy in Ukraine, Joanne.
Thanks very much, Mary.
If that one's not working, this one is.
I may have turned it off inadvertently.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What did I do?
Can someone please?
Good afternoon, Excellency, distinguished guests. When I was much younger, in fact, I was in law school, a friend of mine asked me a question. She posed a riddle. And she said, excuse me, a surgeon is working in a hospital when a patient comes in who needs emergency surgery. And the surgeon takes one look at the patient and says, "That's my boy." And the question was, who's the surgeon? So I thought about it. I thought I had this one down cold. I said, well, the father. No. The uncle. No. The brother-in-law. I was making all kinds of guesses, and finally I gave up, and she told me the answer, and the answer is the surgeon was the boy's mother. I was totally shocked, because here I was in law school, and this was at a time when it was very much a male-dominated profession, and it had not occurred to me that the surgeon would be a woman, a fellow woman. So this is a lesson that I have kept in my head since then. It reminds me that it's really very important to examine your own biases. And that's a reason why I'm particularly delighted to be here today to participate in this forum. Let me first congratulate you on all your very important work here in Ukraine. It's doing a tremendous amount to help promote gender equality and women's political participation here. And I'd also like to recognize and thank the governments of Canada and Sweden for their ongoing support and collaboration in this area. And like a number of you, I think I just took the test, and I hoped for better results than I had when I tried to answer my friend's question. I'm happy to say it did turn out that way. It's a very important test, and in fact, it's something that we use at the State Department. We had a recent meeting there, and it was standing room only for people to talk about what are these unconscious biases that we have ourselves, particularly when we're trying to work in the world to promote women's equality. So it's an innovative tool for examining our own attitudes, recognized or unrecognized, our attitudes towards women, men, political, professional, family life. And I'm very, very much pleased that as a result of our cooperation with the Swedish and Canadian governments, this test is now available for all Ukrainians to help you reflect on your own attitudes, your own growth towards promoting gender equality. Because frankly, gender equality just makes sense, right? No matter from what angle you examine it. If you look at it from a moral standpoint, how can it not make sense that half the population is allowed to contribute to the full extent that they're able? It also makes business sense. There's data that shows that countries with greater gender equality have higher gross national product per capita. And there was a report that came out a while ago now, a Catalyst bottom line report that says that companies with more women on their boards of directors have better financial performance. For example, on average, a 53% greater return on equity. So that's an enormously strong argument, I think. It also makes political sense. Countries with more women in their parliaments tend to have more equitable laws and social programs and budgets that benefit women, children, and families. And conversely, countries where women are denied these basic human rights, they're some of the poorest and least stable countries. There's still a lot to be done to ensure gender equality. In the United States, we've had some very amazing, strong political leaders who are women, and I've been privileged to serve under 3 women secretaries of state. And without wading into partisan politics, it's significant that the United States female candidates continue to fight to break the glass ceiling to become president of the United States. In our own Congress, of course, we haven't reached gender parity yet, so we're working on these issues. Let me give you a couple of examples of things that we've been trying to do. In 2012, a Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton, launched the Equal Futures Partnership, which some of you may be familiar with. We launched it with 12 other founding members. 8 more countries have joined in the meantime. But each one of these nations is committed to making policy, legal, regulatory reforms to open up the economic opportunities for women and to increase their political and their civic participation at all levels of government. We also have NGOs like one called Running Start, bringing young women to politics. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, but its mission is to inspire young girls to run for political office by educating them and letting them know that they're needed in politics and that political office is something that's not only exciting, but it's an attainable goal for them. So it's very exciting, the work that they're doing. And these kinds of efforts are vitally important in Ukraine as well. And it's very encouraging that Ukraine's political agenda includes efforts aimed at increasing this kind of balanced gender representation in elected office. Since 2011, the United States is pleased to have developed a very fruitful relationship with Ukraine's Parliamentary Equal Opportunities Caucus and with the Gender Subcommittee and the Parliamentary Human Rights Committee, and most recently with the Gender Public Council. These are all 3 very, very important platforms for taking a look at the parliamentary agenda, and surely they've had some impact in visibly increasing women's presence and political participation in Ukraine. As you know, the current Ukrainian parliament has the highest number of female lawmakers in history at 12%, but as in the US, the number needs to be higher. So Ukraine is making a lot of progress. There's more to do. And this forum is one of a very practical way of uniting the efforts of people who are interested in these issues, who are interested in looking at projects that promote gender equality, that combat gender-based discrimination, or even help us recognize whatever lingering biases we may still have. So the discussions here can help us all share our ideas, make sure our goals are aligned with each other, increase the impact of our projects, and help drive some positive change. And as the ambassador mentioned already, the United States will continue to support the Ukraine's efforts in this area, both with the government, with non-governmental organizations who are helping to promote gender equality. But success, of course, is going to take very much a concerted, cooperative effort by the political leaders, the civil society representatives, the mass media, all of us working together, both male and female. And so, as you did, let me give a shout out to our male champions who understand this work and how important this work is for gender equality. Our shared work here, eliminating gender-based discrimination, overcoming gender-based stereotypes, it's an essential part, it's an integral part of Ukraine's democratic growth, and it will only enhance Ukraine's efforts towards creating a prosperous, egalitarian society. So, in closing, I read about an experiment in the 1970s with major orchestras in the United States. And what they did is they put a curtain between musicians who were auditioning for spots in the orchestra and the people who were judging them. And they found that when they did this, they hired 30% more female musicians, which I think is rather astonishing. Well, here's to the day when we don't need that curtain anymore to help us all live and work together in harmony. Thanks very much.
Thank you for... No, this one is not quite so efficient. Thank you for a terrific set of remarks, Joanne, and we're very grateful to you for being here, because we know that you have other obligations that you'll have to leave for in a second. I'd like to invite the Swedish chargé d'affaires, David Emterstam. Sweden is a very important partner for NDI, but it's also a very important voice for gender equality around the world. David.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here together with you today. I would like to start by saying a few words about the elements of Swedish foreign policy concerning gender equality. Sweden is the first country in the world to pursue a feminist foreign policy. And through our foreign policy, including in peace and security, we apply a systemic gender perspective. But what does that mean in practice? It means that we don't just want to have a separate gender discussion. Like you have a forum, you have a conference, and then there is one seminar, let's say, devoted to gender issues. That's great. There should be as well. But the important thing here is that gender issues should be streamlined. They should be mainstream. They should come into every aspect of political life, so that in that sense they can be taken into account. On a more personal note, I would like to share with you the experience of being on paternal leave or parental leave here in Kyiv. I just came back from 4 months with my baby. It was a very interesting experience because you meet a lot of surprise and interest on behalf of the Ukrainians. A lot of questions, particularly by older women who come and say, "Do you need any help, like taking care of your baby?" "No, it's okay. I have 2 more at home." "Okay, thank you." But also for myself, it was a very humbling experience. I will come back to that. As for our work here in Ukraine, we see that Ukraine is ranked 67th in the Global Gender Gap Index. It was ranked 67th in 2015 out of 145 countries. So we see that there is plenty of potential here for cooperation between Sweden and Ukraine, together, of course, with our partners such as the US and Canada. And we're really happy that Ukraine now has adopted a national action plan for women, peace and security. So that is basically resolution 1325. This was done in February. We're very happy. I was recently in Kharkiv at a similar event, and I'm really happy today to see that there are much more men here, because at that event I was the only man. And I think this is a very important element that my colleagues were touching upon. It's very important to involve men, such as myself, in this process to have an impact on the gender equality discussion and policies. And I think there are many issues here that are central, but perhaps the key one is political representation. And why is that? I think because if women participate more in the political representation, in the political process, the decisions made by politicians will be perceived as more legitimate, and that will work as a driving force for other areas. I really believe that. Of course, this has not only to do with women. We want a higher participation rate for men as well. But I think this is a key element, and I think that there is some progress in this area, but we would very much like to see more. And one thing that is happening now is the creation of the female or the women caucuses around the country. And that is a great trend. You can leave the partisan aspect of politics aside and work between parties, between fractions for a common cause. And I think in order to achieve better female participation, in politics. Perhaps the key issue is what we in Sweden refer to as the double work trap, where women tend to hold a higher degree of responsibility for the, let's say, household affairs than men. And therefore they work, as in Russian you call it dvojnaya smena, I think, the double shift. So they first work at their workplace and then they come home and work, while the man can work longer at work and not work at home, traditionally. This is an important, very important aspect. I must say, from my own experience being at home with my children, it's a very humbling experience, because I'm from progressive Sweden, but I was still raised a boy by my dad, who is a progressive Swede, but he's also 63 years old, so he has his certain stereotypes. And of course, for me, being at home with my kids, having to do everything by yourself, cook and so on, is very important for I think for my own process to work also professionally with these issues. I would like to finish just by saying a few words about Swedish feminist policy. I think maybe a lot of people in this audience are quite aware of what we are doing, but I don't want to miss out on our foreign minister's key instruction for us to always bring this issue up in such meetings like this. Our approach is based on what we call the 3 R's, which is the rights, the full enjoyment of human rights by all women and girls. And then there is representation, which I've been talking about, promoting women's participation and influence in decision-making at all levels. But then also resources. And here it's about resources, I mean, overall in the political process, but also like in our ministry. We try to work for increasing women's visibility and to hold senior positions in our own ministry. And the 4th R, an official one, is to ensure that the action we take is always based on reality checks and analysis. So we will continue to provide support and expertise to our Ukrainian partners to achieve our common goals, this is the way we think about better equality for men and women, gender equality. And I would like to thank you all again for all the organizers, all the partners who are here today, and I look forward to listening to the fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
I think you can hang on to that one. I'm hoping, yes, this sounds as if it's going to work. I'm so tremendously grateful for all of our contributors to the discussion so far. And I am not going to take up too much of your time with research, but I am going to show you just a little bit. Some of you have seen some of this, and I would urge you to take the handout that's available on the way into this room when you leave or during the break, because this is only a very short summary of what I have. Hands up those of you that took the test before you came into the forum. I know it was more than one. Welcome, Alexander. I know it's more than one of you. Several of you took the test? Sorry. Yeah. Yes, several of you took the test. Is the translation working, first of all? Do we have enough headphones for people? Do we have enough headphones, people? We're okay? Well, quite a few have taken the test. What I'm going to show you is what Ukrainians in general think. So now you know a bit more about your own attitudes. I'm going to show you what Ukrainians in general think. What we have done is we've used multiple methods. Some traditional, face-to-face surveys, in-depth interviews, some cutting edge, the implicit association test, and also a tablet-based experiment in Kyiv. And we have been trying to look at a number of different questions. It's obvious that women are underrepresented, particularly at the national level, in Ukrainian politics. When you look at the parliament in 2014, Ukraine was 56th out of 57 OSCE countries. So clearly, within the broader European sphere, Ukraine has a way to go. But what is the reason for that? The Canadian ambassador hinted at this in his remarks. Is the problem that voters won't vote for women? We've looked at that and we have an answer to that question. Do women associate themselves with political life? And if they are less likely to do so, is that one of the barriers to their participation? I'm going to show you the answer to that question. And what is what does gender balance mean in terms of public opinion? Is this a popular thing to talk about or an unpopular thing to talk about? I'm going to show you the answer to that as well. But I'd like to emphasize that I'd really like you to look at the full handout that's available. Next slide. So the first question, are women underrepresented because voters won't vote for them? This is a really interesting question, because when you ask people, this is a traditional survey, when you ask people this question, and they're thinking about the behavior of other people, more than half believe that other people won't vote for women candidates. So you ask an individual about the rest of society, this is their answer. Next slide. But if you actually ask them about the choices they make for themselves, all the way down here, gender is at 2%. What is it that matters to you when you're choosing which candidate to vote for? In this case, we're looking at the local elections. So when they're thinking about their own behavior, gender doesn't matter at all the way down the bottom here. So what is it that we should believe? So we designed a special experiment, which is on this slide. This is an experiment using tablets instead of pencils and paper to do face-to-face interviews. And we wanted to find a way of testing opinion about gender without asking a question with gender in it. Because sometimes you can have socially conditioned responses. People sometimes treat surveys like examinations. They believe there is a correct answer and that they must deliver the correct answer whether it lines up with their own attitudes or not. So this is a way of getting around the exam question problem in surveys. We did not ask a question about gender. We presented half of our sample in Kyiv with one set of visual images, and the other half had the other set of visual images. You will see that the first set is all female, the second set is all male, and we took quite a lot of trouble to make sure that the only differences between these images is gender. They're all wearing the same clothes, they've all got the same background, photographs the same size, more or less the same hair color and so on. So what did we find? People were told, all the people in the survey, both sets of the sample were told the same thing. These are lawyers who are interested in entering political life. They want to combat corruption. How likely would you be to vote for them? And the results were fascinating. There was absolutely no difference statistically between the willingness of these respondents to vote for the women candidates and the men candidates. I have come to the conclusion, if we just go back, when people say this, they mean it. This is not a socially conditioned response. It really is not the case that voters are unwilling to support women candidates. The barrier to women's political participation in Ukraine does not lie within the electorate. Forwards. Next one. So now we look at the implicit association test. This is the test that all of you, or many of you, have just taken. We did this in 4 cities, in Kherson, in Lviv, in Odessa, and in Zhytomyr. These 4 cities are all superimposed here. Okay, so this looks a little bit like a bell curve. The gender neutral position is this red line here. Can everybody see? This is the gender neutral position. You can see that in all 4 cities, you can see that the balance is towards the male. People are more likely to associate men with political life than women. But what's really interesting is this graph here. Here we've taken the same respondents and we have divided them by gender. We have an equal number of men and women in these tests. So the purple one is the men, and the green one is the women. We had a long discussion in our office, by the way, to avoid using blue and pink. And what we found was that women are more likely to associate men with political life than men are. And this is a pointer to some of the barriers that exist in the minds of women themselves. We have to work harder to encourage women to believe that if they become involved in political life, 1, they can stay clean, because women are more likely than men to think of politics as a dirty business, and 2, that they can have an impact on the decisions that affect the next generation. Next one. So this is also looking at results for implicit association tests, and here we are getting the results from people who voted in Zhytomyr. So we went back to the same respondents after the local elections, and these are the ones in Zhytomyr who told us how they voted. And what's interesting is that you can implicitly, you all understand what this means now, you can implicitly and explicitly associate men with political life and still vote for a women candidate. So these are all the people who voted for women candidates in Zhytomyr, and 75% of them, women and men, who voted for women candidates associate men, explicitly and explicitly, with political life. So I say again, the problem with women's underrepresentation does not lie within the electorate. It lies elsewhere. Next one. So this one, oh, this is what you would get, I think. Yes, this is, sorry. This is looking at what the situation is now and the situation that you would like it to be. You saw some of these questions in the explicit portion of the test that you took. So the orange is the situation that you see around you now, which is male-dominated. But the blue is what people say that they would like, which is a much more equal balance of gender roles. I say again, the problem in terms of the representation of women in politics in Ukraine is not to do with the electorate or an innate bias within society itself against women performing this role. The barriers are much more to do with needing to encourage women to believe that they can play a meaningful role when they see around them a media that is biased against them and a political process that is biased against them, and working with political parties to ensure that in their role as gatekeepers, that they make it easier for women to come forward. I think that's the last picture slide. Oh no, there's one more. What would the difference be if you had an equal balance of men and women in the parliament? What difference would it make? Here you've got two positive outcomes and two negative outcomes. With the positive outcome, the really important one, is if we had a more equal balance in the parliament, then decisions would be more focused on the concerns of everyday people, people's everyday concerns. Women are seen as being much more in touch with the life that society leads than men. And I think that's a legacy of a somewhat male-dominated elite that are themselves seen as out of touch. And on the negative ones, this one here, that you would have fewer qualified leaders, this is another myth about the barriers to women's political participation, that somehow there aren't enough qualified women out there. And fewer people believe this now, and I think the local elections, which several of our speakers mentioned, played a part in that. I think that's the last picture. So in terms of action points, what is it that we can do that's going to help Ukraine to move further in the direction that its own population wants to go? There were some very thoughtful remarks made about not imposing external models on Ukraine, and I don't think that's either valuable or necessary. I think Ukrainians themselves have a strong urge, as we can see, to develop more equal roles, not only in political life, but in working and family life. I think there's more that can be done to help political parties see that it is in their interest to create more opportunities for women and to engage them meaningfully at every level of their work. I think there's more that can be done with the legal framework for elections and for political parties and for party finance. The quota that was introduced for the local elections was not enforceable. For the next elections, whenever they come, it's important that it is. And there's a lot that can and should be done to enable the next generation of women leaders, whether they're in civic life, business life, in government, or in political parties, to maximize their potential and reach as far as they can to the apex of Ukrainian society. Thank you very much.